1. Which of the following is the primary purpose of Docker in software development? A. Running virtual machines. B. Containerizing applications for consistent deployment. C. Compiling source code. D. Managing network hardware. 2. When mentoring a new Docker user, what adult learning principles should be applied to maximize skill retention? A. Focus solely on theory. B. Provide hands-on exercises and real-world scenarios. C. Avoid practical demonstrations. D. Encourage passive listening. 3. Which Docker component is responsible for building container images? A. Docker engine. B. Docker compose. C. Dockerfile. D. Docker swarm. 4. In a DCA exam scenario, what is the most effective method to evaluate a candidate's ability to troubleshoot container networking issues? A. Multiple choice quiz only. B. Observed hands-on practical scenarios. C. Oral questioning without demonstrations. D. Reading documentation. 5. Which communication technique is most effective when teaching Docker networking concepts? A. Using technical jargon exclusively. B. Demonstrating network commands with step-by-step explanations. C. Speaking rapidly to maintain attention. D. Limiting feedback to the end of the session. 6. What is the purpose of the Docker run command? A. Remove a container. B. Build an image. C. Start a container from an image. D. List all running containers. 7. When designing a Docker training curriculum, which sequencing approach aligns with adult learning principles? A. Random order of topics. B. From basic commands to advanced orchestration and networking. C. Advanced topics first. D. Theory only before any practical application. 8. Which Docker object is used to define multi-container applications? A. Dockerfile. B. Docker volume. C. Docker compose. D. Docker image. 9. How should an instructor handle a learner who repeatedly fails to start a container due to port conflicts? A. Ignore the mistakes. B. Explain the issue and guide the learner to resolve it with practice. C. End the session immediately. D. Only provide written instructions. 10. Which Docker command lists all images on a system? A. Docker Pete. B. Docker images. C. Docker start. D. Docker exec. 11. Which method best evaluates a learner's comprehension of Docker security best practices? A. Hands-on lab exercises with simulated threats. B. Memorizing security documentation. C. Reading blog posts. D. Multiple choice theory questions only. 12. Which of the following is a regulatory compliance concern when using Docker in enterprise environments? A. Container performance. B. Adhering to data privacy and software licensing requirements. C. Using open source images only. D. Container color coding. 13. When mentoring learners in Docker orchestration, which technique is most effective? A. Provide demonstration, guided practice, and reflective discussion. B. Allow learners to read manuals independently. C. Avoid interactive labs. D. Focus on memorization of commands. 14. What is the role of Docker Hub in container management? A. Local container runtime. B. Central repository for storing and distributing images. C. Container orchestration engine. D. Security scanner only. 15. Which command is used to remove a stopped container? A. Docker RM. B. Docker MI. C. Docker stop. D. Docker exec. 16. When assessing a learner's ability to debug container logs, which method is most effective? A. Providing example logs and requiring interpretation during hands-on exercises. Asking learners to memorize log commands. C. Only using multiple choice questions. D. Demonstrating but not allowing practice. 17. Which Docker feature allows persistent storage across container restarts? A. Docker network. B. Docker volume. C. Docker service. D. Docker image. 18. Which mentoring strategy encourages learners to internalize Docker best practices? A. Correct mistakes immediately without explanation. B. Encourage reflective analysis of errors and guided improvement. C. Avoid feedback to reduce stress. D. Allow mistakes to go uncorrected. 19. Which command shows all running containers on a host? A. Docker PS. B. Docker images. C. Docker logs. D. Docker inspect. 20. What is the main function of Docker Swarm? A. Build container images. B. Orchestrate and manage a cluster of Docker nodes. C. Provide local container storage. D. Analyze image vulnerabilities. 21. Which evaluation method best measures a learner's Docker networking competency? A. Written multiple choice test. B. Hands-on lab configuring bridge, overlay, and host networks. C. Pure observation only. D. Reading Docker documentation. 22. When teaching container image optimization, which approach aligns with adult learning principles? A. Lecture about theory only. B. Hands-on exercises demonstrating layer minimization and caching. C. Avoid practical demonstrations. D. Provide only slides and diagrams. 23. Which Docker command is used to build an image from a Docker file? A. Docker run. B. Docker build. C. Docker commit. D. Docker push. 24. How can an instructor ensure compliance with licensing when using Docker images in training? A. Ignore licensing considerations. B. Use only images with appropriate open source or commercial licenses. C. Assume all public images are free for any use. D. Avoid explaining licensing to learners. 25. Which scenario-based assessment is most effective for testing Docker container scaling skills? A. Configuring a multi-service application using Docker Compose or Swarm and observing results. B. Asking theoretical questions only. C. Watching videos of scaling. D. Reading documentation. 26. Which mentoring technique builds learner confidence when troubleshooting Docker failures? A. Providing constructive guidance and gradual independence in labs. B. Allowing learners to fail without support. C. Focusing only on theory. D. Using negative reinforcement. 27. Which of the following represents a best practice for Docker security? A. Running containers as root user. B. Minimizing container privileges and using official images. C. Disabling image scanning. D. Exposing all ports publicly. 28. Which command is used to push an image to a Docker registry? A. Docker push. B. Docker pull. C. Docker commit. D. Docker save. 29. How should a curriculum be structured to teach both Docker CLI and API usage effectively? A. Teach them simultaneously with hands-on labs and scenario exercises. B. Cover API first, then CLI without practice. C. Focus on memorizing commands only. D. Provide slides only. 30. Which command allows interaction with a running container's shell? A. Docker exec PS. C. Docker run. D. Docker images. 31. What is the purpose of the Docker inspect command? A. View detailed information about containers, images, or networks. B. Start a container. C. Remove an image. D. List running containers. 32. Which approach encourages reflective learning in Docker certification prep? A. Assigning exercises followed by self-review and instructor feedback. B. Memorization of commands only. C. Watching tutorials without practice. D. Skipping review sessions. 33. Which Docker Compose command brings up a multi-container application in detached mode? A. Docker Compose up D. B. Docker Compose start. C. Docker Compose run. D. Docker Compose build. 34. Which Docker command is used to roll back a service update in a Swarm cluster? A. Docker Service Update, Nash Rollback. B. Docker Service RM. C. Docker Stack Deploy. D. Docker Swarm Leave. 35. What is the primary benefit of using multi-stage builds in Docker files? A. Reducing image size by separating build and runtime stages. B. Running multiple containers simultaneously. C. Creating multiple volumes automatically. D. Encrypting container data. 36. When mentoring a new Docker user on logging best practices, which approach is most effective? A. Explaining log drivers only. B. Demonstrating log collection, filtering, and analysis with hands-on exercises. C. Asking the learner to memorize commands. D. Avoiding practical exercises to save time. 37. Which command displays detailed information about the resource usage of running containers? A. Docker stats. B. Docker top. C. Docker inspect. D. Docker info. 38. When designing a Docker certification prep course, which curriculum approach best supports regulatory and security compliance awareness? A. Focusing solely on CLI commands. B. Integrating real-world compliance scenarios, policy discussions, and hands-on labs. C. Skipping compliance topics to save time. D. Only using multiple-choice quizzes for compliance knowledge.